Thomas Bailey was not a man who believed in bargains. He knew that in the harsh world of the Wild West, if something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. But when the letter arrived from a local land agent, offering an old rundown cabin for 12 cents, he couldn't ignore it. The price was too low to be anything but a mistake, or perhaps a sign of something more. The cabin was located on a hill just outside of town, tucked away in the shadow of the rugged mountains that dotted the landscape. It had been empty for years, no one willing to live there due to rumors of strange occurrences, but Thomas was desperate. His ranch had been struggling for months, the cattle failing to thrive, the crops drying up in the heat. He needed a fresh start, something new to pour his energy into. The letter said little about the cabin's past, but Thomas didn't care. A small, cheap cabin would be better than staying in his crumbling house on the ranch, so without a second thought he made the journey to see it for himself. When he arrived, the cabin was even smaller than he'd imagined. It was tucked away in a grove of thick trees, the air thick with the scent of pine and earth. The wood of the cabin was weathered, its roof sagging under the weight of years of neglect. But despite its condition, Thomas could see that the structure had potential. It had the bones of something sturdy, something that with a little effort could be made useful again. He stepped inside, his boots creaking on the old floorboards. The air inside was stale, and the darkness of the place made him squint as he looked around. The small room was filled with cobwebs and dust, the furniture old and covered in layers of grime. But it was quiet, too quiet. Thomas walked further into the cabin, the light from his lantern casting long shadows on the walls. The space was empty, save for a few remnants of the past. A worn rocking chair by the window, a faded rug in the center of the room, and a stone fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The floorboards groaned under his weight as he moved cautiously, unsure of what he was expecting to find. Then, in the far corner of the cabin, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another pile of old cloth or a coat hanging from a hook, but as he moved closer, his heart sank. The figure hanging from the ceiling was not a coat, it was a body, a giant body. The girl or woman, he couldn't tell, hung from a rope tied around her neck. Her long hair cascaded down, dark and tangled, and her face was pale. Her eyes closed in a way that made it look like she was sleeping. But there was nothing peaceful about her. The rope that held her seemed far too small for her size, and the body, though lifeless, was strange. Her frame was enormous, at least 8 feet tall. Her skin, although pale and covered in marks, was far too large for any ordinary human. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. He took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. What was this? Who was she? And how did she come to be here? His hand shook as he reached up and carefully untied the rope. The girl's body dropped gently to the floor, and Thomas quickly knelt beside her. His lantern light flickered as he checked for signs of life, his mind racing with questions. To his surprise, he felt a faint pulse at her neck. She was alive. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, and though she was weak, there was a faint warmth to her skin. Thomas's mind raced. How could this be? How could someone so large be alive in a place like this? And why had no one known about her? His heart pounded as he carefully lifted her, supporting her head and shoulders. She was heavy, but despite the weight, Thomas carried her across the room and gently laid her on the old rug. He looked around the cabin, desperate for something to help her. There was nothing here, nothing except the remnants of a past he couldn't understand, and then he noticed something. On the floor near the fireplace, partially hidden beneath a pile of old blankets and debris, was an old journal. The pages were yellowed with age, the leather cover cracked and worn. Curiosity filled him, and he moved quickly to open it. As he flipped through the pages, his eyes stopped on a passage that made his stomach churn. It was written in a language Thomas didn't recognize. The letters were strange, almost like a combination of symbols and characters he had never seen before. But there was one word he could understand: Apache. The journal was a history of a tribe, a record of their customs, their beliefs, and their battles. As he read on, a dark story began to emerge. The journal spoke of an ancient Apache girl, the daughter of a powerful shaman. Her name, it said, was Tsukina. She was said to be a protector of the land, a guardian of sacred spaces, and her people believed she held power beyond measure. But the tribe's enemies, settlers who had come to claim the land, did not understand the significance of Tsukina. They saw only a giant, a strange and terrifying woman, and they feared her power. So they took her life, hanging her body to break her spirit. But the curse of the Apache people had done something unexpected. Instead of breaking her, it kept her trapped in a state of half-life, immortal, but bound to the place where she had died. Thomas read the passage again, his mind spinning with disbelief. It couldn't be true. How could this girl, this woman, be the same one that lay before him? He stood over Tsukina, her giant frame now stretched across the floor. His heart ached as he thought about the pain she must have endured, trapped in this place for so long, her body used and discarded. He had heard stories of spirits haunting places, but this was different. This was not a ghost. This was flesh and blood, but why was she here? Why was she brought back to life? And why had it been him, Thomas Bailey, who had found her? He glanced at the journal once more. There was a passage at the end of the pages written hastily as though the writer had feared something. It spoke of a curse, a warning. The girl will awaken when the land calls to her, when the one with the blood of settlers walks upon the earth. She will seek justice for her people. She will be the instrument of vengeance. Thomas's breath caught in his chest as he realized the truth. The cabin, the land, it had been waiting for someone. And that someone was him. Thomas stood motionless in the center of the cabin, the weight of the journal's words pressing down on him. The girl, Tsukina, lay before him, her massive body still and lifeless, yet somehow alive. The air seemed heavy, thick with the weight of a forgotten past and a future that now felt uncertain and dangerous. What had he gotten himself into? He glanced at the journal again, his mind racing. The words of the old Apache had left him with more questions than answers. The girl will awaken when the land calls to her. He had come to this land seeking a simple cabin, but now it seemed as if fate had brought him here for reasons he couldn't understand. Tsukina stirred suddenly, her breath hitching in a sharp gasp. Thomas snapped his attention back to her and his heart raced. Slowly her massive eyes fluttered open. They were dark, filled with a deep sorrow that seemed to go beyond anything Thomas could comprehend. Her lips parted, and in a voice that was barely a whisper, she spoke. "Who are you?" she asked, her words slow and strained, as if they hadn't been used in centuries. Thomas swallowed hard, his mouth dry. He had no idea what to say. Should he tell her the truth? That he had found her in this cabin, bought the land for a mere 12 cents and had no idea about the curse she spoke of. "I'm Thomas Bailey," he said finally, his voice shaky. I found you. I don't know what this is or why you're here, but..." Her eyes fixed on him, and for a moment there was a flicker of recognition. "Bailey?" she asked softly. "The blood of settlers." Thomas's heart skipped a beat. She knew his name. It was clear now that this was no ordinary encounter. He had stumbled upon something ancient, something that should have stayed buried in the past. The thought sent a cold shiver down his spine. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What blood?" She slowly sat up, her large frame towering over him. "You are the one," she said, her voice low, almost like a growl. "The one who has come to break the curse. The one who will release me from this prison." Thomas shook his head, confusion and fear clouding his thoughts. "I didn't come here for any of that. I just wanted a cabin. I didn't know about any curse." Tsukina looked at him with a mix of sadness and understanding. "The land calls to those who are bound to it," she said. "And you, Thomas Bailey, are bound to me. You are a descendant of those who brought harm to my people." The words hit Thomas like a punch to the gut. His ancestors, settlers who had pushed into Apache land, had come with violence and greed, and now it seemed their actions had caught up with him. "I didn't come here to harm anyone," he said quickly, his voice rising. "I didn't even know about any of this. I just bought this place." Tsukina's eyes softened slightly, but there was still an edge of bitterness in her tone. "The land remembers," she replied. "It never forgets the blood spilled upon it." Thomas felt trapped. There was no escape from the situation now. He had come here for a fresh start, but instead, he had uncovered a history he was never meant to know. Tsukina's past and the curse that bound her were tied to this land and to him. She stood slowly, her immense height making her loom over him. "You must help me," she said, her voice suddenly firm. "Only then will I be free." Thomas took a step back. "What do you mean? How can I help you?" She looked at him with an intense gaze, the weight of centuries of anger and sorrow in her eyes. "The curse was placed upon me by the shaman of my people," she explained. "It was meant to imprison my soul, but it has done more than that. It has trapped me in this form. I cannot die. I cannot leave. I am bound to this land, bound to a past that cannot be undone. Thomas's heart raced as he listened. The weight of her words was starting to sink in. He had heard stories about curses, but never had he imagined something so real, so powerful. What do you want me to do? She stepped closer, her massive form casting a shadow over him. I need you to help me find the men who brought this fate upon me. The settlers, their descendants. Only then can the curse be broken. The thought of tracking down the descendants of those who had wronged her was unsettling. Thomas had heard whispers of old families in the area, but he wasn't sure how far this vengeance would go. He didn't want to become part of a cycle of violence, but Tsukina's eyes held him captive. There was a quiet desperation in her gaze that he couldn't ignore. I don't know if I can help you with that, he said slowly. I don't know where to start. Tsukina's eyes narrowed and she stepped even closer, her voice lowering. You are the one who awakened me, she said. You are the one who holds the key to my freedom. And you are the one who must face the consequences of your ancestors. Thomas felt his throat tighten. He wanted to run, to escape this place, but he couldn't. There was no way out now. Tsukina was right. He had come to this land, and now his fate was tied to hers. Help me, and you will have the freedom you seek, she continued, her voice barely a whisper. Fail me, and you will be trapped here, forever bound to this land as I am. The weight of her words settled in the room, and for a long moment, Thomas said nothing. He looked at the giant figure standing before him, so strong, so filled with pain, and something deep inside him stirred. He couldn't explain it, but he felt connected to her. Perhaps it was the blood of his ancestors, perhaps it was something more, but he knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now. All right, Thomas said, his voice low but determined. I'll help you, but I need to know everything. Everything about what happened, about your people. Tsukina nodded slowly. The journey will not be easy. The land remembers, and the spirits of my people will guide you. But be warned, there are forces far older than you or I, and they will not want this curse to end. Thomas didn't know what kind of forces she was talking about, but he knew that his life had just taken a turn he couldn't have predicted. His ancestors' sins had come back to haunt him, and now he had to help a giant Apache girl, trapped in a curse she had carried for centuries. Where do we begin? He asked, his voice steady despite the fear growing inside him. Tsukina's eyes glinted with a mix of gratitude and determination. We begin by finding the blood of those who wronged me. The settlers and their descendants. Only then can this curse be broken. And so, with the weight of history upon his shoulders, Thomas Bailey and Tsukina, the giant Apache girl, set off on a journey neither of them could have foreseen. A journey that would not only seek justice, but could change the course of their lives forever.